We're continuing with the kingdoms and godheads of the greater life, which is Book 2, Canto 6, where we see Ashwapati traveling through these world stairs and climbing higher and higher, and eventually we'll have to go lower and deeper to bring the light into the darkness. So I'll begin with the lines where we left off last time. Just 3 lines above, we have, it can only near and touch. It cannot hold. It can only strain toward some bright extreme. Its greatness is to seek and to create. On every plane, this greatness must create. On earth, in heaven, in hell, she is the same. Of every fate, she takes her mighty part. So we see that this plane of existence must create. Even though it often fails, it doesn't matter. She has to create. And she's the same in her creative power, whether she is in heaven, on earth, or in hell. It's that same force that is working. And this we have to try to understand, because on every fate, she takes her mighty part. A guardian of the fire that lights the suns, she triumphs in her glory and her might. Opposed, oppressed, she bears God's urge to be born. The spirit survives upon non-being's ground. World force outlasts world disillusion's shock. And here we have 2 hyphenated words, very important. World force and world disillusion. Sri Aurobindo tells us in the Life Divine that mind energy, life energy, material energy are different dynamisms of one world force. And he also says again in the same book, Life Divine, an evolution of innate and latent, but as yet unevolved powers of consciousness is not considered admissible by the modern mind, because these exceed our present formulation of nature, and to our ignorant preconceptions founded on a limited experience, they seem to belong to the supernatural, to the miraculous and occult, for they surpass the known action of material energy, which is now ordinarily accepted as the sole cause and mode of things, and the sole instrumentation of the world force. And lastly, I would like to quote from Letters on Yoga, because this is a very important statement as well, where Sri Aurobindo says to us, the Devi is the divine Shakti, the consciousness and power of the divine, the mother and energy of the worlds. All powers are hers. Sometimes Devi power may mean the power of the universal world force, but this is only one side of the Shakti. World force outlasts world disillusions shock. Dumb, she is still the word. Inert, the power. And I would be remiss if I didn't quote to you from the future poetry, because you'll note that word is capitalized, as is power. So Sri Aurobindo says to us, the word is a sound expression of the idea. In the supraphysical plane, when an idea has to be realized, one can, by repeating the word expression of it, produce vibrations which prepare the mind for the realization of the idea. That is the principle of the mantras and of japa. One repeats the name of the divine, and the vibrations created in the consciousness prepare the realization of the divine. It is the same idea that is expressed in the Bible. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. It is creation by the word. Wow. And what does Sri Aurobindo tell us on power? So many things, but I'll just quote one from his letters on yoga, because power is very important in this yoga. It is Shakti. Power means strength and force, Shakti, which enables one to face all that can happen and to stand and overcome, also to carry out what the divine will proposes. It can include many things: power over men, events, circumstances, means, etc. But all this not of the mental or vital kind, but by an action through unity of consciousness with the divine and with all things and beings. It is not an individual strength, depending on certain personal capacities, but the divine power using the individual as an instrument. And we will continue on. Here, fallen, a slave of death and ignorance, to things deathless she is driven to aspire, and move to know even the unknowable. Notice again we have a capital U on unknowable. And Sri Aurobindo tells us in the Life Divine what the unknowable is. He says, the unknowable, not absolutely unknowable, but beyond mental knowledge, can only be a higher degree in the intensity of being of that something, a degree beyond the loftiest summit attainable by mental beings. And if it were known as it must be known to itself, that discovery would not destroy entirely what is given us by our supreme possible knowledge, but rather carry it to a higher fulfillment and larger truth of what it has already gained by self-vision and self-experience. So, here fallen, yes, in this plane of existence, a slave of death and ignorance, comma, to things deathless she is driven to aspire, and move to know even the unknowable. Even nescient, null. Her sleep creates a world. Now, we have to go to the next page. Just take me a moment. When most unseen, most mightily she works, housed in the atom, buried in the clod, her quick creative passion cannot cease. In conscience is her long, gigantic pause. And there's so much to share with you on the inconscience, but I'll just do a little because we have done it in the past. The inconscience is an inverse reproduction of the supreme superconscious. It has the same absoluteness of being and automatic action, but in a vast, involved trance. It is being lost in itself, plunged in its own abyss of infinity. And then in the letters on yoga, briefly, once consciousness separated from the one consciousness, they fell inevitably into ignorance. And the last result of ignorance was inconscience. Her cosmic swoon is a stupendous phase. So we have here the interesting word swoon, which is sort of like a state of fainting or a loss of consciousness. And of course, stupendous is astounding force. And a phase is a stage in some process. So we see her cosmic swoon is a stupendous phase. Time-born, she hides her immortality. In death, her bed, she waits the hour to rise. Even with the light denied that sent her forth, and the hope dead she needed for her task. Even when her brightest stars are quenched in night, nourished by hardship and calamity, and with pain for her body's handmaid, masseuse, nurse. Her tortured, invisible spirit continues still to toil in darkness, to create though with pangs. She carries crucified God upon her breast. Interesting statement. Sri Aurobindo brings in the true Christ many, many times in Savitri. And we will get into those a little later as well. We've had one already, the cross, their payment for the crown they gave. Only they leave behind a splendid name. All these things are very much of the avatar, and in this instance, Christ. In chill, insentient depths, where joy is none, immured, oppressed by the resisting void, where nothing moves and nothing can become, still she remembers, still invokes the skill the wonder worker gave her at her birth, imparts to drowsy formlessness a shape, reveals a world, where nothing was before. It's very, very interesting. You see, this idea of the wonder worker. Sri Aurobindo has so many words beginning with wonder and then hyphenated. We have just a few, for example: Wonder Book, Wonder Couch, Wonder Dance, Wonder Flex, Wonder Flowers, Wonder Hues, Wonder Plastics, Wonder Rounds, Wonder Rush, Wonder Tree, Wonder Web, Wonder Weft, Wonder Worker. So we see that as an adjective, it is something that arouses awe or admiration, something that fills us with admiration or amazement or awe. So imparts to drowsy formlessness a shape. So this plane can create from formlessness a shape. Now, imparts here would be bestows. Bestows to drownly formlessness the shape. Reveals a world where nothing was before. Vladimir, can you give us some instances from the Vedas?
Well, nothing comes to, but wonder worker is an interesting thought, comes from the Vedic perspective, because there is Daksha, the lord of the supermind. He is the father of all the gods, and he actually also the father of Usha, the dawn, the mother. So she is his mother, who became his daughter, as it were, because he projected her from the transcendental to this, and he is wonder worker. And interestingly here, still invokes she, the mother here in creation, invokes the skill the wonder worker gave her at her birth. This is an allusion totally from the Vedic knowledge, I think so. Daksha imparted her, gave her the task, the skill, because he is the skillful worker. Daksha, it means skill, actually. Power charged with knowledge. That is what skill is.
Power charged with knowledge. Thank you. I'll read a little more and then I'll have to say goodnight for a while. Each week I'll get stronger and share as much as possible with you. So we had the wonder worker gave her at her birth that skill, and she remembers that skill. She invokes that skill. And she imparts to drowsy formlessness a shape. Even, we have this line, reveals a world where nothing was before. In realms confined to a prone circle of death, to a dark eternity of ignorance, a quiver in an inert, inconscient mass, or imprisoned in immobilized whirls of force, by matter's blind compulsion, deaf and mute, she refuses, motionless in the dust, to sleep. So this is so important, huh? So we'll go through these lines just briefly. She reveals a world where nothing was before. And we see that in these realms that are confined to a prone circle of death, prone, lying flat, to a dark eternity of ignorance. And I just want to quote one thing from Sri Aurobindo here, and maybe a little bit from the mother. Ignorance is capitalized in this line. And in the Life Divine, Sri Aurobindo says, ignorance is the absence of the divine eye of perception, which gives us the sight of the supramental truth. It is the non-perceiving principle in our consciousness, as opposed to the truth-perceiving conscious vision and knowledge. And to quote from the mother, ignorance means avidya, the separative consciousness and the egoistic mind and life that flow from it, and all that is natural to the separative consciousness and the egoistic mind and life. This ignorance is the result of a movement by which the cosmic intelligence separated itself from the light of the supermind, the divine gnosis, and lost the truth of being, truth of divine consciousness, truth of force and action, truth of ananda. As a result, instead of a world of integral truth and divine harmony created in the light of the divine gnosis, we have a world founded on the part truths of an inferior cosmic intelligence, in which all is half truth, half error. All in the consciousness of this creation is either limited or else perverted by separation from the integral light. Even the truth it perceives is only a half knowledge. Therefore, it is called the ignorance. And this is from the book The Mother. So, I think it's time now to ask someone to read. Madeline, would you read for us? On every plane.
I have to on every plane, this greatness must create. On earth, in heaven, in hell, she is the same. Of every fate, she takes her mighty part. A guardian of the fire that lights the suns, she triumphs in her glory and her might. Opposed, oppressed, she bears God's urge to be born. The spirit survives upon non-being's ground. Word force outlast, word disillusions shock. Dumb, she is still the word, inert, the power. Here fallen, a slave of death and ignorance, to things deathless, she is driven to aspire, and moved to know even the unknowable. Even nascent, null, her sleep creates a world. When most unseen, most mightily she works, housed in the atom, buried in the clod, her quick creative passion cannot cease. In conscience is her long, gigantic pause. Her cosmic swoon is a stupendous face. Time-born, she hides her immortality. In death, her bed, she waits the hour to rise. Even with the light denied that sent her forth, and the hope dead she needed for her task, even when her brightest stars are quenched in night, nourished by hardship and calamity, and with pain for her body's handmaid, masseuse, nurse, her tortured invisible spirit continues still to toil though in darkness, to create though with pangs, she carries the crucified God upon her breast. In chill, insentient depth where joy is none, immured, oppressed by the resisting void, where nothing moves and nothing can become, still she remembers, still invokes the skill. The wonder worker gave her at her birth, imparts to drowsy formlessness a shape, reveals a world where nothing was before. In realms confined to a prone circle of death, to a dark eternity of ignorance, a quiver in an inert, inconscient mass, or imprisoned in immobilized worlds of force, by matter's blind compulsion, deaf and mute, she refuses motionless in the task to sleep. I think we stopped here, or I have to continue?
Yes, we stopped.
Yes.
Yes, we stopped there. Thank you, Madeline.
Thank you.
We'll see you next week.